everyone. Wonderful to see. It's funny, each one of these Zoom meetings seems to be a different gathering of a few regulars and then new people coming. So just great to see you all. And to be able to join together around, teachings that can liberate us, practices that can liberate us. And as you may know, that I have a real interest in how we live our practice, not just confining it to the cushion, but to actually bringing it into everyday life, letting our practice become the path. Because from my perspective and my own life, it has made for a truly wonderful life. I guess that's one way to put it. But it just so much less suffering, so much less suffering when we can actually apply the practices or bring the practices into how we live. And so today I have invited Edwin back. We did a Zoom call before with him, and or maybe even two, I forget. But it's on this topic of the courage to love, which this is our final one on. That it just seems wonderful to have his voice in the mix. And so today, as it is the last one, that we're going to be looking at the two truths. And in just a minute, Edwin will be speaking more about that, but the truth of the relative level and the truth of the absolute level. And to me, this is really, the first title was The Courage to Love, Knowing There Is Nothing to Hang On to. And it's that second part, knowing nothing there is to hang on to, that is the wisdom aspect of it. And it feels like as a human being, we're so much confronted by the ways we hold back in loving, the ways that we want to hang on to love, people identify love with people, and how we can get very confused around this. And so this has been an effort to really just help us to come back to the innate quality of love that is natural within us, and being able to find the capacity to really meet our lives with this quality of love. So with that, I think I'd like to hand it over to Edwin.
Thank you, Myoshin. It's yeah, and hi everybody. Lovely to see all these friends. Living here on the further end of the planet, I realize how so much of my life, 30 years living in North America, and so many close, dear friends there, and of course we also have friends here in Australia. So it's lovely to see some Australians join us too. Um, If you've been around Buddhist teachings for some time, I'm sure you've heard of the two truths, the relative and the absolute. And it's really interesting, it's been in my mind or in my practice or heard teachings on it for decades. But for some reason, just in the last year or so, it keeps popping up. Mingyur Rinpoche has mentioned a few times. We went to teachings earlier in the year with Zongtse Khyentse Rinpoche in Sydney, and he mentioned it. I've just been a guide for the Vajrayana Online for the Abhidharma teachings, and of course, is very deeply embedded in those teachings of the early Buddhism. And I'm just slowly gaining a greater appreciation for how profound and how informative a deeper understanding of the two truths can be from our own practice perspective, and particularly, in an understanding of a wisdom level that can lead to our liberation. It's foundational in terms of sense of being able to see how we perpetuate our suffering and get a glimpse into how we can mitigate and actually be free from our suffering. So it seems appropriate, the courage to love. uh, as part of what Myoshin's been offering here on this meditative life. Um, so the relative, in Buddhist terms, samsara, the stock market, as Mingyur Rinpoche likes to refer to it. Another way that I'm fond of saying, the tide comes in, the tide goes out. It's just that seasonal movement, constantly changing between the polarity of highs and lows, and you can think of that highs and lows can mean many things emotionally, uh, our relationships, our success. Everything in samsara goes up and down, and understanding that all of that is conditioned. When to quote Mingyur Rinpoche's beautiful liturgy, the nectar of the path, when causes and conditions come together, a result is sure to follow. And that's exactly what the relative reality is all about. And of course, the Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths, he made it very clear that the truth of suffering is deeply embedded in the relative reality. And it's where we have family. It's where we have career. It's where we have nationality, place of origin, place of location. It's all relative. So it's our family, it's our neighborhood, it's our occupation. All of that is relative, and so we're constantly mapping our sense of self in the relative. And it's really helpful to understand how core that is to our identity and to our suffering. And so, uh, uh, and of course, it's where all the joys of life are too. Think of all the wonderful things, all the pleasures in life. But it's also where all the suffering lies. And so understanding that, and of course, in Mingyur Rinpoche's wonderful teachings in the Joy of Living, level 3, he talks about the unhealthy sense of self and the healthy sense of self, and how critically important it is to see that in the relative, everything is changing, multiple bits and pieces, and all interrelated. I think the last one we did was on interdependence, and Myoshin and I taught in Sydney a workshop a few weeks ago on interdependence, and just how critically important it is to see the interconnection of life. So that's the samsara, and it's where we have all that in terms of the courage to love. It's where we're born. It's the family of origin, our relationship to our parents, our relationship to our siblings. When I mention parents and siblings, our relationship to our children, right? It's a tug of war. It's bittersweet in some way. Bittersweet is the essence of the conditioned reality. And through these practices, we're encouraged to open our heart and embrace it all, right? It's like you can't, if you try and block any of it, if you try and get rid of any of it, if you really work hard to create the perfect samsara, it's invariably going to let you down. And so you have to be able to open your heart and be with it and accept it. So then there's the absolute nirvana, the unconditioned. I could call it the ineffable, but then I'd have to shut up. So, or as Mingyur Rinpoche refers to, the self beyond self. And here we really get into wisdom, the wisdom teachings, particularly of awareness, of the cognizant clarity of the mind, being able to learn how to be with the sky rather than the clouds, or with the ocean rather than the waves. The clouds, the content, the waves are the substance of samsara, but it's all contained within a vast, spacious, clear knowing, uh, uh, and it's our true nature. That aspect is who we truly are. And so learning how to recognize that anywhere, anytime. Uh, I've um, I've kind of characterized it as the solvent that dissolves the glue that binds samsara together and creates the suffering in samsara. This view of the infinite capacity of the mind, the pure, clear, unborn, unconditioned aspect of nirvana is really it's the balm. Really, it's where liberation lies and frees us from this. Yes, the phrase I've used is the single, solid, separate sense of self. The single, solid. My English teacher Garish would love that phrase. I think is assonance. Is that the word, Garish? Single solids. You're muted, my dear friend.
Maybe it is us. I
Alliteration.
was going to say alliteration.
Alliteration. You're right. Yes, assonance is yes. Alliteration. You're right. Thank you. We need an English teacher in every club. The single, solid, separate sense of self. Yeah. And that the single, solid, separate sense of self is samsara and is where we're suffering and is the cause of suffering. And the mind that is liberated from that fixation is our ticket to the end of suffering. And so then it becomes like, so how can my knowledge, the wisdom of the ultimate, inform my understanding of the relative in terms of the topic we're talking about here, the courage to love? And so we can embrace the tide, the waves, the highs and lows, but not get too attached, not cling to, reify, make real, not get fixated on wanting particular outcomes, developing the capacity through our practice to be open and reflective and caring, still fully engaged, still be completely and utterly committed to it. It's not a disassociation. Disassociation is more like would be falling into the concept of nihilism, to deny the interconnectedness, the ups and downs, the ins and outs of samsara. But we have to embrace it, but be fully present to it and connected in our discourse with all that we find ourselves enmeshed in. Yeah. So there's probably a lot more could be said, but I don't want to waste everybody's time here. And I know Myoshin wants to jump back in, so I'm handing it back to you, Myoshin.
Okay, so as you were talking about that, we do find like the wisdom of the absolute. That's where we're at home with all this change, and actually, I think I said in my recent teaching that something about how we discover it isn't that we really have the courage to love, that our nature is love, and it expresses itself in that way. But one of the things on the relative level that I find so interesting is that it is really through this quality of love that we can start to see the nature of reality, because we see, like with somebody whom we really love, and if we start to cling, if we start to grasp, maybe they get sick, they're passing away, then it's really painful. It is. I know many people who have talked about the profound experience of being with a loved one as they pass away. Know that I know in my own life, this has been huge. You open up the potential there. Yeah, not always. I'm sure we have different conditions, but the opening up that can happen when we really love somebody, just the sense that when somebody passes away, that, that love is still there. It's quite profound in what we can see. And so in our day-to-day lives, as we bounce around and at times can be quite aversive to whether it's a loved one or it's the neighbor that's screaming or it's the state of our country or the world, that, when we hit up against pain around these places, these beings that we feel conflicted about in that moment, it can also be really remembering this quality of love that can help us to not shut down there and to have, in those moments, it feels like courage to be able to stay present with the challenges as they're arising. And so I, for me, the two truths I find so juicy, because I feel like this is where the rubber meets the road, and where I've seen for myself, I can practice alone in a cabin and be really happy. But put me in the world and it might be a little different. And yet, I don't want to just have to live in a cabin to feel okay. So it's like being able to be in the midst of all of these different relationships that we have on this relative level, and to not shy away from it, to to embrace, to look, to be able to find this quality of love within ourselves. And, with people who are dear to us. I remember as a teenager how many times I held back because I was afraid of getting hurt, afraid of, there was just some form of fear that was there, of protecting, and not it, not being able to love, knowing that I can't hang on to what's there, and that all things are impermanent on the relative level. So it's really quite a task that we have. Edwin, it looks like you have something to
Yeah,
share.
there was just something little I wanted to add, and thank you for prompting me. You know, in the curriculum, Toga Minga Rinpoche, The Joy of Living Path of Liberation, all of the method, are all skillful ways for us to recognize our true nature, which is the ultimate level, the ultimate reality, our true nature. And the qualities that we perceive there are awareness, loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom. And then the loving kindness manifests as the desire to be happy, and the compassion as the desire to be free from suffering. We know all of this. This is the core teachings of the joy of living, right? And so when we're engaging in the relative from the perspective of the wisdom of the ultimate, it's all based on clear seeing, understanding, kindness, generosity. These are all these qualities are the way the ultimate expresses in the relative, which I find to be, so when that's what's fueling our heart, that's what makes the difference in terms of our life here in the relative. Yeah.
Bruce. It is interesting that we do have to do the exploration to really see all of this, that to take this self that feels so solid, or through loving another, that they feel so solid that we love them one way but we don't love them in other forms. So we really, as we pay attention, through awareness in our lives, we start to see how limited that all is. And, we certainly don't need to judge ourselves because we have so many different uh, things come up in our mind that are unsavory. But we just begin to see that's probably causes and conditions coming together. Result is sure to follow, and then it's how we respond to that. That our response so often can be harsh for ourselves, can be harsh for others, and yet we can also just see it as a cloud in the sky, and not lose that connection with how we on the absolute level, this innate nature, the way things actually are. We can stay open and touch into these beautiful qualities. when we don't fixate on this as being who I am or put somebody else into a box. Yeah. And so it's a journey. It's a learning journey.
I think as Buddhists, sometimes we kind of get to believe, if we were truly liberated or, if a non-attachment or whatever, then we shouldn't. We have all these conditions about we shouldn't feel, grief and so forth. But I was really struck when I was reading some passages from the early teachings, the Theravada teachings, that where when it was near the end of the Buddha's life, but his two principal disciples, Shariputra and Moggallana, passed away. And, of course, the whole assembly of his monks, the whole Sangha, was incredibly impacted by it. And even the Buddha, when he spoke about it, talked about the grief and how it was like left a hole in the Sangha and so forth. And I just thought, oh, even the Buddha, because on a relative level, that's the way it is. And it was really, I remember when I read that, I thought, oh, it was really impactful in some level. And I think we misperceive, what it means to be liberated.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but we do come, just as Diane's friend, we can come to this place where we see that love lives on. And that I also feel like, how to say, if we have really loved someone, then it's really wanting to give the best of ourselves to the world through the love that we have experienced. It lives through us in a way. It inspires us to do the best we can. And that's where really coming back in a simple way to, as Mingyur Rinpoche says, awareness is the essence of meditation. And so if you're able to be with the experience, with awareness, without kind of going down the rabbit hole of the story, but the story might be popping up, and you can include not just the story, the body sensations, that you're opening up to the big picture of it, then it's really helpful. But when you start to lose that awareness and really, grind the story or be overwhelmed by the story, then that's skillful wisdom is saying, hey, right now you don't have the energy to meet this. Why don't you go and have a cup of tea, go for a walk, go do something, that's wisdom speaking. So yes, we open to the grief, and we also need to stay present within our life, and it may be too much to go down that road at that time. And it really does point to just I don't know, the importance and the relevance and what the teachings and practices that have to offer us right now. I mean, I think you described it so well, and knowing somebody's similar views, and yet, no way to hold that. I often think of a baby being born and they start to suffer. They have no idea if that is going to go on forever. They have no context at that point. And when we have some context, and at first it might be intellectual, but as we practice, it becomes more something that we draw on, that we can really look towards, not just the words, but how we can find the freedom right here, right now, in this moment with what we're entangled with. And, I, again, am so appreciative of Mingyur Rinpoche over and over again, encouraging us to use the challenges as a support. And the difference between when I try to resist a challenge, when I fight with a challenge, and when I can be with a challenge. And then it opens up in all its multifacetedness. And there isn't a fixation on the outcome being a certain way. So we really can open ourselves up to a sense of infinite possibility. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, that was a great illustration where of what how the Dharma makes a difference to the way we see our reality. And particularly this sense, like when we're without the view of the ultimate, the relative becomes so real, so solid. It's our only reference point, and we become so identified with it, and and all the stories in our relationship just perpetuates the reality of it. There's something beautiful about the notion of the absolute that just creates space, for it's still real, like if you, as I've been saying a lot lately, if you kick your toe on the end of the bed when you get up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, it's real. It's not that the relative is not real, it's real. But there's just something about having the wisdom of the absolute that, to be able to see the sky and not be so wrapped up in the clouds, that makes a huge difference in some level. You still care, when cause and conditions come together, it's all related. So when you see such the forces of ignorance perpetuating such harm, the heart naturally responds by concern and care. And you can see so much about, even from here on the other side of the planet, there's so much of what I see from the US media that I go, oh my God, right? What suffering is this causing? You can't treat your people like that, is the way I feel. But yeah, just having the capacity to see, to experience, to know, the absolute. And the crazy part about the absolute reality, it's not rational. It's not. It's non-conceptual. So there's no handle on it. You can't grasp hold of it. You can't. It's ineffable. You can't even define it. It's just a state of being. It's not a thing, and that's why the practices are so important to learn how to let go into the state of being, without having to try and figure it out. Yeah. But thanks for bringing that up. That was great.
That was really touching to hear, and I'm sure many of us can relate to what you're saying. That the way in which it can be easy to talk about this stuff, and yet the living at times, and the discovery of that absolute level, the journey can be really painful. And but that is the piece that where there is a suffering, it's again that signal in our mind that we're not yet free. That's okay, but we can look towards this, or we have these capacities to meet this. And going back again to my saying that sometimes we can meet it head on, sometimes we have to do other things to find balance. And I think there was some really important piece that you mentioned about, having compassion when we're not being met with kindness, and having compassion when we might have to draw boundaries. And this is really true, and a way that I think oftentimes that we misperceive the qualities of love and compassion as having a sense that anything goes and is okay, and I'll just keep my heart open, and then people walk all over us. And that's not what these qualities are about at all. In the connecting and living with them, the compassion is when we have to draw a boundary, that it's really awareness, loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom all coming together in a moment, in the sense that, okay, this is not helpful to keep going down this road. It will lead to perpetuating suffering rather than finding a way to alleviate suffering. And that right now, what will be helpful is not to be in that situation, or whatever it is. But it's a voice of wisdom. It's spoken it's spoken with a clarity that comes from that, from knowing, and being in touch with, this is suffering. How can I alleviate it? This is something I can do. We all do this because of awareness and love for ourselves and even another. Knowing that I know with one relationship in my life, there was a point where I realized that we are both creating bad karma in being together. It's not helping either of us. And so, giving it space. But yeah, thank you so much.
It's interesting to me, the way Minga Rinpoche teaches and enables us to connect to loving kindness and compassion is by really connecting to our own heartfelt desire to be happy and to be free from suffering. And so at its core, loving kindness, compassion is really loving kindness and compassion for ourselves. And I think it's easy when we begin to relate to loving kindness and compassion as something we need to do for others that we forget ourselves. But really, the experience of loving kindness and compassion is our own heart. And if our efforts to be kind and caring to others takes us away from caring for ourselves, then I think that's where we cross a boundary or we lose the real essence of it. And of course, loving kindness, compassion for all beings includes ourselves. So self-care is probably equally important. And now, of course, when we connect to that and we know we have loved ones or people who are suffering, naturally we wish to respond in a loving, caring way. But taking care of oneself is critically important. And, only you know all the ways that you can, all the things that you can do that nourish you. You have to find, whether it's getting out in nature or physical activity or going to movies or whatever it is, you're the one that needs to find the ways to take care of yourself.
One thing you said that's really important, Lorna, is about a process. And there is, how to say, we put so much pressure on ourselves to get it right now. We can be so hard on ourselves when we feel like we make a mistake. It's so easy as a practitioner, I think Edwin said something about this, to think that we should be beyond this. And it really is, in my experience, to be able to include whatever appears in the sky. And, we will be deeply challenged at some point and may kick and scream for a while. But again, if we have some context that we see the kicking and screaming in, it's really helpful. And that kicking and screaming, to me, is what gets sparked is the curiosity. What is it? What is really being reacted to so strongly here right now? And that willingness to look, that willingness to see. And certainly the teachings about our interconnectedness, impermanence, that we are, there's nothing singular within all that's happening, that there's some almost, to me, quick way of seeing that glimpse of the absolute within that, that it isn't so tight and fixed as it appears. And that, it doesn't take a lot to suddenly see, oh, there's layers here, there's different components, and some of it could be conditioned from a long time ago. And so, of course, if we're not seeing it, it has power. But if we're starting to see it, then it's losing its power. It is that cloud in the sky. So that, just, and that, it is really hard to be a human being at times. We're exposed to so much suffering. And I think it's vivid right now in many, many ways. With the media world around us, with all of the different ways that we see it, even visually, the suffering that's happening on this planet. And then just the different conditions of the time on this planet that we're at, where we have taken so much in many ways, and the planet itself is getting choked, this living organism. And yeah, we still have to find our way, and to not give up on ourselves and not give up on the world around us, to keep looking, keep inquiring. Let that explorer in you be ignited with challenge. You think of all the people that sailed off into an ocean and the big storms that they went through to get where they didn't know they were even going. I think it's a bit like that for us. we get glimmers of where we're going, what this is about. But to take our, these qualities, they're here. And we come home to them. They are guiding us. We just keep misreading their signals at times. But they are guiding us when we have the ears to listen. So I see we're at the top of the hour. Edwin, did you have a few words to share here?
Just to say thank you, everybody, for participating and sharing. It's really sweet. It's always really rich and beneficial to talk about these sort of things together, and also really just to reflect on how fortunate we are that we've, stumbled upon the Dharma in this life and these remarkable teachings, and how incredibly informative they are for how to live our lives and how to relate. It's not so much. I've been fond of saying that all of these practices are not really about changing our world, but changing our relationship to our world.
Yeah.
And it's you're really rearranging your lens through which you perceive your reality, and therein lies liberation. So, and understanding how that happens is the gift of the Dharma. So, we are fortunate. Thank you.
Okay, so the practice it will be around bringing to mind the different connections of our life and having a sense of seeing it as a display, as the whatever might come up for you in the scene of it, but as a reminder that we live in this world of fluidity, we live in this world of change, and that our hearts always have the capacity to love, even though it might get obscured. Okay, so finding your posture. Just taking a moment to check in with how your body is in this moment. The sensations, the energy. Reflecting on how your mind is. Maybe it's calm, peaceful, or stirred up, busy. Or quiet emotions might be present. Lots of thoughts. And seeing within this if there's a sense of self. I, me. Maybe owning one piece of it. or it's shifting, changing. Just letting it all be as it is. Then bringing to mind any loved ones that just come to mind. Maybe there's memories, images. And just seeing how our relationships may have shifted, changed with time. There's times that were great, wonderful. Times that were challenging. Just a sense of not holding them as to being any one thing. Just for a few minutes, letting your mind be really fluid with people coming to mind. Just how all these relationships shift and change. On a relative level, we meet a person, a being, one moment in time, one moment of presence. We're impacted. On a relative level, there's a whole web of connection with all living beings. All living beings just like us, wanting to be happy, wanting to be free from suffering. We love, we fight, we resist. we try to cut off. And yet, on the relative level, all connecting. On the absolute level, nothing in itself inherently exists. And yet it appears. Nothing is solid, independent. We can rest in the wide open space of awareness. In which these relationships appear and disappear. Just for the last few moments, rest in the open ease of awareness without trying to do anything. And as we conclude this practice, just holding the wish in our hearts that any benefit that's come from our time together ripples out and touches this living web of connection and helps all beings to find happiness and freedom from all kinds of distress. And if the cat could ring the bell, conclude the practice. Okay. All right. So Coming back together on the screen. Yeah, lovely to be here with everyone. So thank you for being here.